Joyce Pellino Crane. I'm the news director at WestfordCAT. I'm sitting here today with a former member of the Select Board, Elizabeth Almeida. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Joyce.
Nice to have you here to converse a little bit.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I was surprised when you decided not to run again. And so I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about your reasoning on that. What's going on in your life and why did you not run again for Select Board?
Sure. It's a really difficult decision because it has been a rewarding experience. And I think it's really important work for community members to volunteer in these roles. For me, it was a realization that what I was giving up in time with my family, especially my school-aged children, and in my business, I'm self-employed, it was just too much of a commitment for me at this time in my life, but certainly something I would consider returning to in the future. But I know that for these next few years, I need to spend more time with my kids and working in my business.
So tell us about your business. Is that the garden beds that you began?
No, so my business is Fat Moon Mushrooms, and I grow organic gourmet mushrooms for local restaurants and farm stands and CSAs.
Oh, that's interesting. So I was at what's it called? In Acton.
Rapscallion? Yes,
Yeah.
Rapscallion. They're one of my customers.
So you might have brought in that they were like all admiring this plume. What is that called of mushrooms when they're all connected? There was a special word for them.
I don't know what word they might have used. Sometimes they look like a rose or a flower, the way they have a lot of petals, and you might have one large mushroom that's a few pounds. So yeah, it is impressive when I harvest one of those and take the whole thing to a restaurant. They really are beautiful.
We've got to do a story on this.
Sure.
It's too good. Well, so you have this business, and how old are your children?
They're 9 and 11 now.
Yeah, so they're at an age where they really still need a lot of you.
Right, and it's, I realized I think I gave up too many bike rides and ice cream cones last summer with them, and I want to make sure that I have enough time for all of those memories right now while they're at this age.
Yes, I can't say I blame you. I'm very curious about your education, your background. Where were you? Where did you come from before you landed in Westford?
I grew up in rural Ohio, Northwest Ohio. Most of my family is still in Ohio. I went to Ohio State University for my undergraduate degree, and then I earned my master's in management at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. I lived in Cleveland for 7 years, and then after I was married, my husband had been living here, so we ended up moving back out this way, and landed in Westford by chance, and couldn't be happier that we did.
Yeah. So how, by chance, were you looking in a different town and then somebody showed you this town?
Not particularly. It was, at that point, our kids were very young, and we weren't as focused on the schools as we perhaps should have been, but, happened to find a place here that we liked, and fortunately realized after we moved here what a wonderful place it is to raise a family and to have children in the school system as well.
Yes. And you said you have a master's degree. Did I miss the subject matter?
Management.
Okay. So that must help you in the business quite a bit.
Yes, it certainly does.
And it probably helped you on the board as well.
It does. I have always enjoyed numbers and finance. And so, I'd spent time in graduate school and then in my own business being comfortable reading spreadsheets and numbers. So that aspect of being on the select board was very comfortable to me. And
so it's called Fat Moon Farm.
Yes.
Is this where you're living now, or did you live there, or did you farm it?
No, so I rent space. I was growing the mushrooms at my house, and then it outgrew the space we had here. So now I rent space for my mushroom business.
And is that at Fat Moon Farm or somewhere else?
Well, it's in a mill building now. I don't discuss the location because it's not set up for the public to visit.
Yeah.
It's not at all conducive to that. I do everything wholesale for restaurants.
So we won't give your secrets away.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. My father, I grew up in New York, and right near the Bronx, like a town away from the Bronx. And my father's store was in the Bronx, and he was a food distributor to the restaurants in that area. So I know a little bit about that kind of business. And it seems like it would be a great deal of fun. But how did you come up with the idea?
So I used to grow vegetables, and I did that for a few years. And then I was shifting my focus, and I still wanted to be involved in the local food movement, and I wanted to have my own business because my children were young. And so I took a lesson from graduate school where one of our professors said that an architect he had worked with said to force creativity, he would take an old project and put limitations on it. And so I thought, if I take my old project of growing food for people and put the limitation on it of no sunlight, because I live on an acre of woods, like much of Westford, how could I still be involved in the local food movement? And that led me to mushrooms when I realized I could cultivate mushrooms in the woods right around my house. And then it grew from there to indoor cultivation so I can grow year round.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. I'll have to try that exercise.
It is. It was a fun way to, a fun experience to come up with something new.
Yeah. So how are you going to spend your summer now that you no longer have to spend time on select board issues, which I'm sure took a lot of time? What will you do with your free time?
I'll probably spend more time over at the community garden. I've been involved there since the beginning, 6 or 7 years ago now. And I have a nice plot. It's a lovely community of people over there. So it's not uncommon to be there at 5:30 in the morning and be chatting with friends while we take care of our, harvesting our vegetables and weeding. So I'll spend time there. And then again, with my family and in my business. Those are pretty much, and certainly we can't, it's hard to socialize these days. So it'll mostly be work and family time and a little bit of gardening.
Oh, that sounds so nice. And I should disclose that I'm a member of the community gardens too. And we did a little tour of your garden last year, and I was overwhelmed by it. You did a lot of
beautiful down there. So fun. It's so pleasant to be down there. And everybody's friendly. I feel like it's the friendliest place in Westford because people are doing their gardening therapy, and usually people are in a good mood when they're down there.
Yeah, I think there's nothing more satisfying than watching something grow from seed. I just, just think it's a fascinating process. So
I haven't been down there in 2 days, and I'm just wondering, with all this rain, like I'm going to go down there, my cucumbers are going to be taken over the world by the time I get back down there. So it'll be wonderful to get, to see it after it rained instead of, the tedious watering that we've been doing, trying to keep up.
Yeah, it's the zucchini that worry me. Last year we couldn't stop them. They were like these things that kept coming at us, and we couldn't get enough of them. And then I found out
they double in size.
Yeah.
You turn your back and they're growing.
They were hilarious, but I didn't know, and I'm just going to mention this, that you can donate to the food bank at the senior center. So I didn't know that yet last year, but I know it now. So, and I don't know how they're collecting it. I'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, I think they'll figure that out pretty soon. They were kind of waiting to see what the, how the world would be when we got around to the point that people had too much food. So I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but I know there is a commitment to collecting and sharing the food because certainly people need it, certainly a need for it. So we want to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful cause.
Mm-hmm.
Do you foresee yourself running for any office ever again at this, in the future?
I don't know. I haven't made up my mind on that. I've told myself I could take 3 to 5 years to spend more time with my kids at this age. And certainly, it made the decision to not run again easier, knowing that I could come back to this in the future. In 5 years, I could certainly, if it's a better fit in my life at that time and I have more time available, I could certainly come back to this role. And that was reassuring, knowing that I could always come back and serve the community again.
What do you see as your major contribution to the board?
You know, the way I contributed, and especially during my year as chair, I was just treating people the way I would want to be treated and acting, trying to be a good leader and being kind to people. And I think more than anything that I've appreciated is folks who have commented on my term as chair of the board, the inclusion that I tried to foster and the respect, listening to people. I think that civility, and I think we probably all share that the feeling that there's just not enough of that in politics, whether it's, local, state, or national level. And I really felt like if I could bring, that civility to our board in our local community, then that is a service to the town. And to let people be heard, to give people the opportunity to speak and let them be heard, even if we can't accommodate their wishes or needs. That was always a priority for me, to figure out how to chair and facilitate the meetings in a way that the community felt included in the process. And I think, that started from the very beginning. I felt somewhat like an outsider because I had not run for office before. I did not come up through other boards, as select board members often do.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to use that outsider perspective in terms of what would the average person who hasn't sat through finance committee meetings for 5 or 10 years, what would they like to know? Yeah. And I think, that's why I started with the Show Me the Money program, because in the process of even running for office, I worked very hard to educate myself. And when I spent time with Dan O'Donnell, I thought, this is information that more people should understand. And so that was, one of my first initiatives and accomplishments on the board. And I was very proud that during this past year, during the budget season, even though it was difficult, to know that people were still going back to that presentation 3 years later and pointing to it for folks who were new to the process, to remind them that they could go back to that resource. So it's, I've appreciated knowing that we created something that was helpful not only at that time, but has a life beyond that evening, and it's still of use to people in the community.
Yes, very much. So I think, was that done with the League of Women's Voters?
Yes, they helped us. So it was Dan O'Donnell, myself, and the League of Women Voters that organized it.
So do you have anything you want the community to know?
The very best part of being on the select board would be that we have a front row seat to see the best of our community. We get to see the hundreds of volunteers that make Westford a terrific place to live. There's so many people that quietly do their volunteer work in town. They don't get recognition for it, but we enjoy the fruits of their work every day. Just today I was out in the trails hiking with my kids, and we have a whole team of volunteers who rarely get recognized, but every Tuesday morning they take their chainsaws and pruners and they go out and maintain our trails. I can think of so many ways that our town is made better by people who quietly volunteer. And on the select board, we get to see that, we get to appreciate that, we get to see how people's passions contribute to our town for the better. In addition to the numerous volunteers, both in the community and that sit on the official boards, we also have a terrific town staff. And I was always struck by how dedicated each and every staff member is. They are there as public servants. They appreciate that their work, they're typically experts. They're always experts in their field, and they come at their work with a sense of service and purpose. And I think that comes through in the quality of work that the town receives from town employees. And just each time I had the opportunity to work with a town employee and appreciate their expertise in their field and the kindness and compassion with which they do their job, I was always reminded of how fortunate we are to have such a wonderful town staff. And I would give credit to Jody Ross for the leadership she provides in that. Certainly there's a culture of service among town staff, and I think that leadership certainly starts at the top with her and is embodied by all the town staff.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was very heartening to hear. Is there anything else you want to leave the residents of the town with?
You know, I think an interesting question I was asked midway through my term by someone who didn't live in Westford, had lived here and moved away, and asked me, so why would anyone move to Westford? And since then, I've often reflected on our shared community values. And I think they're always good to remind ourselves of so that we stay focused on what we have in common and what we value together. And I think certainly we would all agree that educating the next generation is critically important, and that's certainly a top priority in our community. I also think our community's shared value of conservation and caring about the land and the earth, is evident everywhere as you drive around town. We are all connected to the conservation land. Most of us within a half mile of our doorstep, we can get to some beautiful tract of conservation land. So I think that is a value that we continue to live every day, and we continue to commit to every year in our budget process as we continue to make commitments to preserve land. I think we also have a tremendous amount of civic engagement and volunteerism in our town, which Jody Ross has told me is unique for a community our size. I think we have 85 volunteer boards associated just with the town government. Never mind all of the community organizations and church organizations, but just a tremendous level of civic engagement that makes our community unique and a special place to live. And finally, I think the fourth value that I've seen is our connection to our roots and the way we value the Westford Museum, our history, and that we try to find ways to bring that to life. That history isn't something that's dead and 200 years behind us. But it's something that can continually inform what we do. And I think I especially like when those values come together, and considering Westford's long legacy in education, and especially educating women before other communities chose to do that. And I think we're still seeing the fruits of those values that our community has shared for hundreds of years. So I like to reflect on those and to remind our community of those shared values so that we can stay focused on those issues as we move forward.
It was beautiful. Thank you for speaking with me today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
For WestfordCAT News, I'm Joyce Pellino Crane.